I don't know if you'd seen that earlier this week, the Muslim vote that we featured on the show a few months ago, they put out two conflicting statements, one after the other. One was saying they are supporting some pro-Palestinian Labour candidates, and then they later on changed their position to say that they were going to support no Labour Party candidates. So I went to put a survey out, and I was really surprised at these results, because would you prefer a Labour government to a Conservative government? Now, obviously, the majority, just about 50%, well, 50% says there's no difference. 9% Labour would be worse, and no is 4%. But still, 37% of subscribers who watched the show thought that Labour was better than the Conservatives as a government. This was the next question on that survey. Are you planning to vote Labour on 4th of July? Yes, 31%, which I thought is a pretty high number, considering we're obviously not the biggest fans of Keir Starmer on this show. So people are still thinking that Labour is the better of two evils, or the lesser of two evils. So I asked some people to speak about this, and I've got some people who came back to me and said they'd speak on the Zoom, who answered the survey. One of them is Tim Oxton. So what was your reason for thinking that you would vote Labour, or that Labour was worth voting for?
Well, my reason is that we have no left candidate in my constituency. We have 6 candidates. I'll read them out to you. Labour, Conservative, Lib Dem, Reform UK, Green, and Climate Party. Now, the Climate Party is a kind of pro-business Green Party, so it splits the Green vote, and the Green candidate is completely hopeless anyway, and she's a novice. She isn't able to answer elementary political questions, and she's not going to get more than 2 or 3% of the vote. And as for the Climate Party, well, I don't want to know about them. So do I vote Conservative? Certainly not. Never have, never will. Do I vote Lib Dem? No. Do I vote Reform UK? Absolutely not. So really, I have to vote Labour as being the least bad. We haven't had a Labour MP here in Colchester, where I live, since 1950, believe it or not. But there's a sporting chance that the Labour candidate will win now. I do know the Labour candidate personally. She's a pleasant enough person. She is, I regret to say. Sorry, go on.
Yeah, but I mean, just for example, on the genocide, as we're talking about the yes. Muslim vote statement there. I mean, they've changed their mind. They aren't endorsing any Labour candidates. I mean, but if you vote Labour, do you not think that you're in some way endorsing their policies and what they've done, especially on Gaza? I mean, is that not in your mind in any way?
Well, yeah, of course it's in my mind, but the Tories and the Lib Dems have just the same policies about Gaza, so far as I know. We do have a Muslim population here. They turn out every Sunday morning at the same time as your show for a vigil at the local war memorial, and they aren't enough to have attracted a shall we say, a pro-Muslim vote. I feel very envious of all those people who have a choice of 2, 3, or even more left candidates. We haven't any left candidates here, and there aren't any in any of the neighbouring constituencies either.
Okay, well, I'm going to bring on Graham Bash, who's also on the call, and replied to say that in some situations he would suggest voting Labour. What's your take on?
Crispin, can you hear me? Yeah,
I can. Yeah.
Well, look, sorry.
Just wondering. So I'm just wondering. I mean, do you not think a vote for Labour is an endorsement for Starmer's policies?
It's much more complex than that. I think, as Justin said, we need to look at the bigger picture. Now, I totally understand Comrade's contempt of the Labour Party and of Starmer, especially with his support for genocide in Gaza. I share your feelings, but I want two things from this election: a Labour government with a working majority and as many as possible socialist MPs. So why a Labour government? I don't argue, let's make this clear, it is the lesser evil. It isn't. The differences between the parties' programmes for government are marginal. My reason is that having a Labour government provides the best conditions for rebuilding the left, with the prospect of a real collision between a Starmer government and the resistance in the trade unions and beyond. The next Labour government will face a desperate economic crisis, and its only remedy will be to attack the working class, threaten many of our freedoms. It's going to be a car crash, and who knows what the effect on the relationship between the unions and the party will be. And secondly, we need as many socialists as possible in the next parliament to give political expression to that resistance. So I support the election of both Labour MPs who have shown some backbone, such as Diane Abbott, who played it brilliantly against Starmer, Apsana Begum, Zara Sultana, and yes, John McDonnell, who's had a good war, and a few others, as well as those, of course, standing against Labour, but who must have a real base in their communities and not just get a couple of hundred votes. So I include Jeremy Corbyn, candidates perhaps in Newham, Tower Hamlets, Liverpool, Joe Bird, in spite of standing for the Greens, not because of it, and Pamela Fitzpatrick, Chris Williamson, who, despite disagreements, I always would vote for, and with some difficulty, if you want me to go into it, I don't need to, but George Galloway as well. Now, I agree with Justin, it's going to be difficult to envisage any more than perhaps two, Jeremy, George Galloway, and perhaps one other, I don't know, independent candidates winning. But we need to look at this bigger picture. And I think in the period of a Starmer government, we may be approaching the end game for the party, Labour Party, as a party with links to the trade union movement. But that break still hasn't happened. There's still so little space, however, for a fight back. And I think the possible, even probable outcome is that the, in effect, ACUS-led Labour Party will close that space altogether. The exclusion of Pfizer Shaheen, really quite soft left, and ditto the even softer Lloyd Russell Moyle, is a sign of our times. And when serious comrades leave the party, for instance, Darren Williams, who used to be on the NEC, we must realise it ain't business as usual. So what it means is that where there are no serious left alternatives, such as in the new constituency of East Thanet, where I still have a vote, I'm going to vote for the awful Starmerite against the horrible Tory and the unspeakable Reform UK. That's the logic of wanting a Labour government. And if we fail to build that resistance to a Starmer government, fail to build the left into a coherent force, to give that resistance political expression, the consequences are going to be very serious. And my last point, if we fail, the forces of the far right are ready and waiting, especially if they have a standard bearer in Parliament, with Farage likely to win in Clacton. So comrades and Crispin, we've got to get this right.
Right. Okay. Well, thank you for saying all that. Sarah Lazenby's also on the call and replied that she would be voting for Labour. Are you there, Sarah? She said she was reluctant to come on, so maybe she's reluctantly not unmuting herself. Sarah? No. It doesn't look like Sarah's coming on. She might not be there. So I'm going to bring on people who.
Yes,
there,
I'm unmuted.
Oh, you are. Okay.
Yes.
Let me just find you. Hold on. Do you want to explain why you'll be voting Labour or considering Labour?
Yes, I would like to. First of all, I'd like to say that what Graham Bash said not only said what I would like to say in relation to Oxford East to some extent, but there's a little bit of a difference. But he also explained to me so many other reasons, particularly relating to the relationship between the unions and the party. I am going to be voting for Labour because, I mean, it won't really make a lot of difference. So I've been told by somebody who was shocked by me saying I would vote Labour, because they wouldn't, because Annalisa Dodds, who is in the cabinet, she didn't vote against the Gaza vote. She abstained, and that was enough to put my friend off. But my friend says there's a 22,000 majority she has, so she's going to get in if I vote or not. However, I shall still vote, because I actually find Annalisa Dodds an extremely purposeful MP. She's worked as an MEP for a number of years and now come into Oxford East. She writes extremely good replies. They may take time to get to you, but on the big issues of the day.
Right.
And that's why I would like to see her in government. But I've had an awful time with what she's been up to. It's worried me and upset me. So
Okay, I mean the thing is we're going to get people who'll fire back at what you're all saying, but I put you all in a gang so you feel a bit more cozy and protected. So I'm going to bring on we've got Craig Chambers. What would you like to say in response to what you've heard? Because you're obviously not of that opinion.
No, not at all. If you look back at, can you hear me all right?
Yeah.
If we look back at the last 10 years and what's gone on behind the scenes, I mean, it reminds me of the quote of George Bernanos, where he's talking about corruption and society. The first sign of corruption is the end justifies the means. Now, if you have it, that is exactly the neocon ideology which Starmer and his acolytes have clearly embraced. And, you know, people keep telling me, oh, we'll have to hold your nose. I'd need a gas mask to vote for Keir Starmer in any form. I don't even care if it's a good local MP who's in Starmer's government. Absolutely no chance. The guy is corruption on stilts.
Right. And we've got Jane Lee as well. Jane?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. What's your response to what you've heard for justifying, or I mean, that sounds a bit defensive on the other side, but anyway, for voting Labour, whatever.
Well, I hate to argue with Graham, but I disagree with him entirely. I think that 4.5 years is a long time for the left to make absolutely no progress. There is absolutely no evidence that the unions are going to, that being in the Labour Party, that the Labour Party itself and that the union's relationship with the Labour Party is going to go anywhere that it hasn't been already in the last 4 years. I think the unions need to reconstruct both themselves and their political activities. I think there's a point, and the point was, of course, as Sarah pointed out, that disturbed her friend. The point was where we had people who had a chance to vote for a ceasefire in a genocide abstained. At that point, I think that pragmatism goes to the wall, and anything that you do now to support the Labour Party, including giving its vote, is just collaboration. And I think, to speak of what Justin was talking about, I think what's lacking there is the sense of urgency. That we're not just a little island, you know, with one small government. We're part of a massive movement to the right. And, you know, we should be really worried, have a great deal more sense of urgency than I've heard from Justin and from Graham. And I think, you know, right now, today, we should be thinking of all of these problems in terms of the European election, which is going on, and where, you know, there's only Claire and Nick who have actually woken up and smelt the Reichstag burning. This is an immense move to the right. anyone who supports it, and it's going on in the Labour Party, this immense move to the right, anyone who supports it is a collaborator. I can say this comfortably because a dreadful candidate, Polly, in our neighbourhood is my Labour candidate. I would have a great deal more difficulty saying it if Diane were my candidate, but I would still say it.
Right. Okay. Now that I've got other people who want to speak, so I'm just going to put on Rory, who wanted to speak about how this argument plays out in personal, I suppose, interactions with people. How are you doing, Rory?
I'm good, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Look, I'm very aware of of Justin's contribution, particularly about the need for comradely discussions. And I think it's really important. I'm not surprised that nearly a third of the people in your poll were talking about still voting Labour and staying in the party. But I think there's a really important aspect to all this, which is the treachery that has gone on over the last 6 years. And it is a central theme running through the whole of the recent history of the Labour Party. And it disturbs me enormously, to the extent that I had a conversation with a comrade who's in the party recently, and I said, look, I'm not angry with you for being in the Labour Party. I'm not angry with you for voting Labour. I'm sad for you, and I don't know how you can put up with the treachery that's been imposed on you. And they said, treachery is what you get in politics. Suck it up, get used to it. That's politics. Now that shocked me, and it made me reflect. And it made me reflect in this way, that I think we should not need to tolerate treachery. It's probably the worst aspect, and it's the most common aspect of what's running through the betrayal of our class, of our friendships, of our comradeship. And I would just say to people who are still intending to vote Labour, I genuinely think that treachery is not something which you should put up with. And I don't think it's something which will ever do you any good. And I plead with you not to accept treachery, because you don't deserve it. You're too good for it. And it absolutely will destroy you, the party, and our class.
Okay. Well, look, I'll let Graham come back in on that, because I can see him sighing with that. I'd like to hear what he's got to say to that, Graham.
Okay, you hear me now. Yeah. Oh, Rory, my old comrade, treachery didn't begin with Starmer, did it? It began it began with the creation of the party. I mean, in many ways, the disaster, the tragedy, the obscenity of what Labour is doing on Gaza is the same as what the leadership did on Iraq 20 years ago, but we remained in, and I think we were shown to be right. But unlike then, I think we're in a different situation. I think we are moving towards an end game, and mine isn't at all a loyalty to the Labour Party. It is how we can best build an alternative. And I think that alternative isn't going to be built unless and until we have the awful experience of a Starmer government. Then the possibility of a split is possible. I think the odds are still against us creating a new party. I just want to maximise our opportunity to build an alternative. So I'm not treacherous or supporting treachery. I'm not collaborating. I just want us to seriously think about the best conditions in which we can build an alternative and bury the Labour Party, not just complain about it from the margins.
Right. Okay. Well, look, I'm going to let Jane finish because you and Jane are neighbours. So let's hear a neighbourly. You have to see each other, so you can't be too aggressive, Jane, because you might see him in the street. There you go. There you go, Jane.
Am I? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
No, I mean, I know how tough Graham is. He has to listen to Jackie ranting every day, so he can put up with me. I think I don't think that that the left in the Labour Party are going to be any more effective going forward than they've been so far. So far, all they've been able to do is to try and convince us that they're waving at us and not drowning. Richard Bergen and people like that have really only kept our attention, but have not actually done anything with it. And I think that that we have to recognise that the real problem are these corporate parties altogether. Both the Labour and the Tory party, the structure of the party, the structure of the parliament, the whip, the way elections happen, all of these things are the problem. But most importantly, are enormous parties that have already many years ago sold their soul to the capitalist system, so that now we have someone like Rachel Reeves who thinks that growth is actually just like a croupier bringing a few more gambling chips in from the casino capitalism. That the party's structure, the party's ethos is entirely bound up with something which is totally against what Andrew Feinstein or Jeremy Corbyn or Pamela Fitzgerald want. Fitzpatrick, sorry, beg your pardon, Pam. So when I talk about, I'm sorry if I called it you a collaborator. I didn't mean to actually. I know how tough that word is, but you have to remember I'm an historian and that I've read the papers of the Epiration, and I know the moment where pragmatism becomes collaboration.
Okay. Well, look, I think we've had a good. So Craig wants to have a go, but I'll have to move on. We can maybe have people talk a bit later in the show. Craig, what did you want to say?
Yeah, I just wanted to say I think everyone's made some good points, but I think we're underestimating the power of door knocking here, and I think people are really open to it. I really do think we can swing this a lot more than we think at the moment. So I think George Galloway's really got the right idea. Get out there, knock on the doors. Let's take the message there. I think we're underestimating how open people are to some kind of change. I think a lot of people, with legitimate reasons, don't trust Starmer to provide that change.
Yeah.
Thanks.
All right. Look. As I say, people can come a bit later if we've got some more time at the end. Thank you, everyone, for contributing, especially those who stuck their necks out on the voting Labour, because I guess you knew you might get a bit of flack for that. I won't say what my view is, but I think most people might know what it is. My view is that I wouldn't vote for Labour. Anyway.